The Jagged Alliance series has always been about strategy and tactics, allowing players to contemplate how multiple actions will affect large-scale operations. Picking the best mercenaries for a given job and executing missions with skill and precision has been the major draw of the series since the beginning, and since its creation, the series has accomplished all of this using a turn-based gameplay model. Jagged Alliance Back in Action ditches the turn-based mechanic for real-time combat, trying to strike a balance between old and new. To do this, it implements a BioWare-esque pause option where you can line up actions for your mercenaries and coordinate the battle before jumping back into the fray. Sadly, despite a few sound concepts and a massive amount of content, Back in Action falls short of its predecessor's mark on the genre. For the most part, Back in Action sticks to the series' strengths. The game even follows the same storyline as all the Jagged Alliance games before it. Essentially, the player has been sent to a third-world country in order to eliminate its tyrannical dictator. Accomplishing this goal involves gaining a foothold in the country and winning back territory from the local military. The more territory you control on the world map, the more income you generate, and the easier it becomes to achieve your goal of liberation. Ironically, the way the game is set up, it's very easy to feel more and more like you're simply replacing the dictator you've been sent to kill, rather than liberating the country from her grasp. You can choose to jump into the game head first or spend some time in the comprehensive tutorial, but once you've started the game, you have no choice but to hit the ground running. As always, there are dozens of mercenaries to choose from, and they all have unique loadouts, individual strengths, and quirky mannerisms. Mercenaries still carry their trademark biases towards one another and will outwardly express their approval or disapproval of squad mates. At its best, the combat can be very enjoyable. Anyone with a love of micromanagement should feel right at home with Back in Action's gameplay. Unfortunately, Back in Action's micromanagement will ultimately feel very limited. While the game's mercenaries are as varied as ever, the game's combat options are not. It boils down to a few commands that quickly become repetitive. Since the game is no longer turn-based, all the strategy that went into spending action points on various battlefield functions is gone, and those few functions are all that remain to hold up the action. Mercenaries can heal, shoot, reload, and throw grenades whenever they are told to, and while lining up and coordinating actions in the pause screen can be satisfying for a while, without a deep system of character-based abilities to fall back on, the real-time switch makes for a less strategic and less engaging combat experience. Nevertheless, maneuvering your squad and executing missions flawlessly can be very rewarding, making the combat in Back in Action enjoyable despite its flaws and limited replayability. Technically, the game is not without its issues either. The enemy AI isn't great, and your mercenaries aren't always as responsive as they should be. Additionally, the game's technical presentation isn't anything special. Poor character animations and voice acting, coupled with outdated visuals, combine to create an experience that looks and feels like a game from 5 or 6 years ago. These problems are made more glaring by the fact that, as a series, Jagged Alliance has a history of quality, and Back in Action could have been a rebirth rather than a flawed reminder of what used to be. While there is a limited amount of fun to be had in this combat sim, it's hard to see what kind of audience it will actually attract. On one hand, the game isn't sporting the kind of production values or depth that newcomers to the series would expect from a game released in 2011. On the other hand, the strategic elements that made Jagged Alliance great have been replaced by a newer model that will leave series veterans unsatisfied. The developers behind Back in Action chose to try and innovate rather than reiterate, and they should be commended for their efforts. Unfortunately, Jagged Alliance strengths were gutted and replaced by fundamentally flawed mechanics that, while potentially fun and engaging, were not fully realized here. If you absolutely love tactics and micromanaging and don't much care how you get your fix, Back in Action is a sometimes fun, albeit flawed, combat sim worth checking out. If you're looking for something with higher production values and a bit more depth, look elsewhere. Thanks for watching this review. If you found it helpful, please like and subscribe.